Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Comics Thursday. Yesterday was Wednesday, New Comic Book Day. That's when new comic books come out. And I tried. I tried to make a video yesterday on comics, but I simply, once again, ran out of time. I have all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a fuselage of work that I need to do, and it's causing me, for some reason, all of it was predictable. But for some reason, I didn't predict it, and it's causing me to mismanage my time, which I ordinarily never do, or at least not so as you'd notice. I have more time than most people. I have essentially an extra day in every day because of how little I sleep. So even if I mismanage time, you'd never visibly see it. But I do. People are seeing it now because this has been... Anyway, I was going to make a video, and it had to be the thing that got cut, so it got cut, and I wanted more time to think about it anyway. So this is a Thursday comics video, and there's only one comic. I bought one comic, and it is the latest issue of Conan the Barbarian from Marvel Comics. Marvel Comics recently got the franchise for Robert E. Howard intellectual properties back after years, and have been putting out Conan the Barbarian, Savage Sword of Conan. The World of Conan comes out next week, and the reason that I want to talk about it, the reason I needed time to think about it, I didn't need time to think about this issue. This is fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. It is, the indicia at the beginning of the book is indicating that these issues, this is issue number 4, it's indicating that these issues are all part of one overarching storyline. They certainly seem like one-shot issues to me. They don't seem like they're part of any overarching storyline. And I don't mind that. For a long time, comic books were only one-shot issues, and I love that. Instead of invariably keeping an eye on the inevitable trade paperback and plotting things at a snail's pace. But when it was announced that Marvel Comics was getting the rights back to Conan, to the World of Conan, I was a little confused. And this is where we get into Comicsgate. Those of you who aren't interested in comic books won't be watching this video anyway. And those of you who are interested in comics will probably have heard of Comicsgate. It started a few years ago as what I believe initially was an online, largely YouTube-driven, although there were some blogs even earlier than that, but a largely YouTube-driven phenomenon that was largely based around criticism of the then current crop of Marvel Comics. Actual criticism of them. These characters are no longer in character. I was reading this character for 40 years. All of a sudden, he doesn't sound anything like himself. And also, this issue is poorly done. It's poorly paced, the plots don't make any sense, there are gigantic plot holes, and the artwork is poor. And there was one channel in particular, the leader of all of these channels at the time, called Diversity in Comics, who would go through issues, panel by panel, making irrefutable sense about their shortcomings, about how the Emperor has no clothes, about how, look, here's the latest issue of this book, Marvel's obviously proud of it, it's part of a big event, maybe crossover series with them, I want to take you through this page by page and show you how bad it is. And Comicsgate started out, I think, that way, but it quickly became a culture war thing. In fact, the culture war thing now that Gamergate is over. In fact, that's why it got its name, from Gamergate, which is a whole, if you don't know what that is, it's a whole other video, and it's probably not one for me to make. But the initial channels that were criticizing the crappy quality of Marvel Comics then went on to why. Why has this happened to our favorite comic book company? Why? Who are the people involved who are doing these things? I myself think, and I thought at the time that was an unwise decision to turn things personal like that. That prevents lots of people from listening to what is otherwise ironclad valid criticism. Unfortunately, though, one way or another, Comicsgate did that. All of a sudden, all the videos on and channels started cropping up like toadstools, and all the channels were all personal. And once they all became personal, then they had to become ideological. What do all these people have in common? And that is where the great SJW menace came from, the great progressive stack SJW menace. Now, I have encountered some progressive SJWs online and in person, and they have, for me, universally been infuriating. They are incredibly condescending, incredibly arrogant, incredibly entitled, and incredibly ignorant. They not only don't know anything about anything that happened before the year of their birth, but they also aren't interested in knowing. They aren't interested in knowing any of it either. Whereas up until I encountered these people, the young people I encountered still didn't know anything about anything, but they weren't just ruling it out. They weren't just saying, oh no, privilege, oh no, I know. I don't know about it, and I don't want to know about it. I don't want to know anything about it. And also what progressive, the worst of the SJW progressives say on college campuses, which is not only I don't want to know anything about it, but I will sue you if you teach me anything about it. If you try to, my parents will sue you, and they'll win. You'll never work again in your chosen job. The Comicsgate crowd started to center on these people, and they started to identify what diversity in comics referred to as a contagion, that they had contaminated Marvel Comics. What a lot of commentators didn't recognize at the time was the specific nature of that contamination. Those of us in the book world would recognize it in a heartbeat. I wasn't paying any attention at the time, or I would have noticed it in a heartbeat, because we already know what it looks like. We know where it comes from. It comes from YA literature, YA books, and it comes from the worst of them, not the best of them, not the ones that challenge you and thrill you and make you want to live in that world and that keep you on the edge of your seat for these three-dimensional, complex characters. I've read contemporary YA that's like that, and so have you. But we've also read lots of the other kind, right? Lots and lots of the other kind, where all of the stuff that was bothering Comicsgate, that started to enrage them, is all stuff that would have been familiar to us. Plot lines that have no actual stakes. Perpetual personal validation. All the characters are friends. All the characters validate each other at all times. Yay us, go team. Of course, the kind of reverse sexism where no female character is ever flawed, ever wrong, ever weak, ever needs to learn anything. Again, the worst YA, not the best YA. You know, I'm sure that examples are coming to your mind. The point is that back in 2015, 2016, if we had noticed that, we would have been able to say, well, yeah, this is YA. It's just, and once you realize that, then you can trace the careers of a lot of the people who were doing it, and they come from the YA world. They don't come from comics. That was something that original Comicsgate agitators pointed out left, right, and center. That once upon a time, it was considered the pinnacle of your career to work at Marvel Comics. You didn't go there originally. You didn't start there. And if you did, you certainly didn't get your own marquee book with no experience. It started to drive them crazy that they were seeing all of that kind of thing, and that it was having real practical effects on the Marvel lineup. I pointed out some of those effects a couple of years ago on this channel. Well, one time I looked at a Marvel House ad, the ads on the inside of Marvel Comics, that showed all of the Marvel characters and said, you know, Marvel on the march, that sort of, that. In my day, it would have been Marvel is on the march, that sort of thing. You know what I mean? Where they have just a picture of all of the Marvel characters. I remember looking at the picture and thinking, okay, in the background, far in the background, I think I recognize Doctor Strange. And I literally don't recognize any of these other characters. None of them. I initially thought, when I looked at that house ad, that I did recognize the Hulk, until I took a close look at his face and realized that it wasn't the Hulk. It was a big green guy, but it wasn't Bruce Banner. It wasn't, and none of the others, none of them. It was as if aliens had come in and just, I was in an alternate reality, and the Marvel Comics there was still around, but I knew no one. I've been with Marvel Comics from the very beginning, and I remember seeing that house ad and thinking, okay, wow, it was a moment for me where I realized, wow, this is fundamentally changed, and I saw a direct one-to-one correlation between that fundamental change and me not buying the comics anymore. It isn't just that I didn't recognize the characters. It's that when I bought the issues, they were terrible. In just the ways that Diversity in Comics and a bunch of other channels were pointing out. Poorly done. Unsatisfying. No stakes. Silly. In the worst way. Silly in the worst way. In the brainless way of the worst of YA. And in the years since then, Comicsgate has only exploded. And it's made itself legitimately newsworthy. Because, of course, the for want of a better term, the SJW progressives that they were targeting personally fought back. And once they got their feet underneath them, they fought back much better than Comicsgate. Started labeling Comicsgate a hate group. Started labeling all of its members racist and sexist. And that's going to stick. That's going to work. We know the times we live in. So the Comicsgaters are still out there, and they're still making videos decrying the downfall of Marvel Comics. And I think by now a lot of them are realizing the long-term price they're paying. They will be ostracized from the industry that they love forever. And it's worse than that. The price is actually worse than that, because the internet never forgets, as we've always been told ad nauseum. They will be associated with racism and homophobia and transphobia for the rest of their lives. So in other words, when they're 60, long after they have even long since stopped talking about any of this, thinking about any of this, their children will look them up on the whatever online is at the time and find that. That stuff's not going away. But they also made themselves newsworthy because they started to set up privately funded comic books on Indiegogo or GoFundMe or whatever. And boy, oh boy, detractors who thought these are just a couple of lonely, bored, middle-aged guys typing away in the dim light of their basements were fundamentally proven wrong. Vast amounts of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars were pledged for these private comics that you will never see in a comic shop. You just get them delivered from the guy who makes them. That's amazing. And that is truly newsworthy in a way that got Marvel Comics' attention. Not the attention of the creators, the writers, the editors, the artists, the inkers. They are all warriors in the culture war trenches. It didn't get their attention. But it got the attention of Disney, that owns Marvel. It got the attention of people in the corporate boardrooms. Some of you remember, I have a friend who's worked in Hollywood forever. She's a Hollywood survivor. There aren't many of those. It takes a lot to be one. And she is one. And she has told me, believe you me, the channels that you're talking about, the YouTube channels, the tiny little YouTube channels that you're talking about, they have been discussed. They have not only been discussed in boardrooms at Disney, they have been shown. Somebody just calls them up and shows videos. And the reactions around boardroom tables all over the Disney corporate-scape have not been exclusively negative. Let's just put it that way. Marvel Comics loses money, hand over fist. And a lot of these Marvel Comics Comicsgate people in their videos, amidst extremely ill-judged personal attacks on creators, amidst the occasional ill-judged rant, they do some other things that are extremely questionable, but amidst all of that stuff, the best Comicsgate channels also point out, in addition to everything else, this is costing you money. This is a bad business investment. Even if you don't want to change it to the way that we want it changed, you still should change it, because this isn't working. Nevertheless, despite their best efforts, that group, that mindset, that milkshake crew SJW mindset is absolutely entrenched at Marvel Comics and looks like it's branching elsewhere. Other comic companies have also embraced a turn towards hard left progressive ideologies, even though the mantra is get woke, go broke. And so far, there is not one single real world objective example of something that disproves that mantra. Not one in all this time. So there might be some truth to it. But even so, that group is still entrenched at Marvel Comics. So when I heard that Robert E. Howard's intellectual property was going to be transferred back to Marvel, I worried quite a bit. Quite a bit. I would say I peed my pants, but at my age, that's no real achievement. But the reason why is because Robert E. Howard, almost a century ago, very intentionally created this Hyborian Age, and especially Conan the Barbarian, as sort of the walking, talking, ale-swilling manifestation of his masculine id, to use Just One Reader's Freudian terms. He created Conan as an unabashedly man. Conan is big, he's smart, but he's not intellectual, he's not reflective, he's not religious, he's not delicate. He's a pure example of what that SJW cadre would be expected to hate, to resist, or, in the case of Marvel Comics, to subvert. They have been subverting it. In Marvel Comics, they have made the standard male heroes who were the tentpole industries into walking, talking jokes. Thor not only becomes a bloated, mead-guzzling drunk, but also loses his quote-unquote worthiness even to his own name. It isn't just that Odin or the powers of Asgard or whatever gave the hammer and Thor's superpowers to a woman. It's that they gave his identity to a woman. She was called Thor. She was Thor. She was worthy of his identity, and he was not. And Thor was the biggest game on the savannah. He was the most Conan-like of the superheroes. So you can take him down, you can take anybody down. But they proceeded to take everybody else down, too. Captain America became a Nazi. Tony Stark became a Spider-Man-style quippy hero, always in the background of much stronger female characters. in ways that don't do anybody any good. But the social justice groupies, these writers, these YA writers who came into Marvel, have a firm control. And when I heard that this was going to happen, I thought, oh, God. Well, okay. So, best case scenario, they farm out the Conan books to creators who get Conan and just do him that way. Best case scenario, the Robert E. Howard Trust, the people who actually dispense with these intellectual property, the copyrights to these things, probably had a long sit-down conversation at Marvel Comics and said, this is what you're not going to do with our character. And if you do, we have a clause in this contract to revoke this business deal. You're not going to turn Conan into, an intersectional feminist. You're not going to do that. That is not a reflection on whether or not intersectional feminism is worthwhile or not. It's a reflection of the fact that it's not this character. It has nothing to do with this character. So you won't do that. And if you start to, we'll stop you legally. Maybe that conversation happened. Maybe it didn't. Or maybe, worst case scenario, Marvel thought, well, we'll take the properties and we'll just enhance the female. There are some female characters in the Conan mythos that would work really well. Belit, the pirate queen, is getting an issue of her own, her very first individual issue next week at Marvel Comics. And Red Sonja has held down a comic of her own for decades, so at other companies. Well, the one thing I wasn't expecting from the run of Conan the Barbarian itself, what anybody would have to think is the flagship run of Conan in Marvel. The one thing I wasn't expecting is a run of the comic that acts like that whole culture war never happened. These comics are fantastic, and they read exactly like Conan should read. There's no hint anywhere of the kind of thing that, again, to use diversity in comics term, infests the rest of Marvel Comics. There's not a hint of it anywhere in these issues. So this has me confused on Comic Book Thursday because I don't know what's going to happen with Conan. I'm going to assume, at least until the first shoe falls, I'm going to assume that the Robert E. Howard rights holders had that conversation with Marvel and said, this is not what's going to happen. You can try some of that stuff elsewhere, maybe with peripheral Robert E. Howard characters, but Kull, Solomon Kane, King Conan, Conan the Barbarian, Red Sonja, anything like that, you're not going to do it with them. And if you do, we'll come down on you. We'll revoke this deal. Maybe not happen. I'd like to think so. But one way or another, oh boy, I cannot recommend these Conan books enough. They're fantastic. Every issue is fantastic. And every issue is fantastic in its own different way. This one, well, they have one thing in common. They have one thing in common. And unfortunately, it's a mistake. And unfortunately, it's a mistake that is literally the very first thing you see when you open every one of these issues. A typo. Now, I know these issues have all been done months ahead of time. I have sent off a couple of letters. I'm sure they have been deluged with other letters pointing out the typo. Get rid of the typo as soon as this run is over, as soon as you can. Maybe Marvel is listening. Maybe they don't care. But you can see this is the Nemedian Chronicles, and look how it starts. No, O Prince. Between the years when the oceans drank Atlantis and the gleaming cities, and the years of the rise of the sons of Arius, there was an age undreamed of, when shining kingdoms lay spread across the world like a blue mantles beneath the stars. Hither came Conan, the Cimmerian, black-haired, sullen-eyed, sword in hand, a thief, a reaver, a slayer, with gigantic melancholies and gigantic mirth, to tread the jeweled thrones of earth under his sandaled feet. The time-honored introduction to the character of Conan with a map of the Hyborian Age. And the mistake? It's O-H. There are two mistakes in that first line. It's not no O Prince. It's no, comma, O, just the single letter, capitalized, because you are addressing the prince directly. And also Prince is capitalized, because you're addressing an individual prince. This is a typo. It's no O Prince. O apostrophe capital P R-I-N-C-E. But aside from that, none of these issues are the same. And this one is incredible. Just amazing. It's called The Life and Death of Conan Part 4. And the title of this issue is The King in the Cage. But I swear you could read it alone. They don't read like parts of a story. It is written by Jason Aaron, and it is drawn fantastically by someone named Gerardo Zaffino. And it gives us a story of King Conan, as you can tell from the cover. The original Conan stories bounced all around Conan's chronology. From when he was a boy, to when he was a teenager and he was already fighting as a mercenary and a thief, to when he was in armies and then leading armies, and finally to when he was king of Aquilonia, the greatest kingdom of the Hyborian Age. And this takes place when he is king. He is just recently king of Hyboria, and he is bored stiff by the bureaucracy involved and starts to get actually sick. It starts to make him physically ill. And his doctors can't come up with a reason for it. The reason for it is that he is learning to be civilized. And it's making him ill. It's literally making him ill. And he decides on a quick remedy. The quick remedy is he needs to feel his blood pumping again. There's a lion that's been sent to him by rulers in the southern kingdom jungles. And he orders his soldiers to open the cage and let the lion out, even though the beast killed 3 people in an attempt to capture it and is known to be vicious. He thinks, all right, he punches the lion, in fact, and says, all right, let's fight. This is what I want. This is what I need. I'll fight you. But the lion won't do it because he recognizes a kindred spirit. Look at that artwork. Just look at that. That is incredible. They become friends. But that won't work for Conan's plans. It won't work because the lion won't fight him. So he decides instead to have his advisors keep their ear to the ground to find out who the very worst people are in Aquilonia. Are there a rape gang? Is there a criminal enterprise? Are there a gang of wharf thieves? Something like that. Something. He asks his advisors essentially for Batman-style advice. Are there crimes happening in Aquilonia? And when he finds out that there are, he puts a skull mask over his face and goes out to fight those people. Not necessarily for superhero reasons. He's mainly doing it because he wants to kill people. He wants to feel his blood pumping again. Look at this panel that the artist gives us. Look at that. That is just amazing. Look, that is just incredible. The scars on the arm and the gobbets of flesh coming up, that is just amazing. That is a one-panel page. A legitimate one-panel page is something where that would be wasted if you didn't give it its own page. Amazing. Just amazing. And it starts to help. That plus the continued comradeship of his lion starts to help. And it leads to the bittersweet ending of the issue, which is incredible. The whole thing is just amazing. It's a one-shot Conan story, the like of which I've never read before. There was a whole King Conan comic book series once upon a time. And there have been people who have adapted King Conan stories where the Conan in them is old. But I've never seen it done anywhere near as good as this. And you know, that's not the first time for Conan the Barbarian in this new Marvel run. Every issue has been incredibly memorable in some way of its own. Same thing's true with the Savage Sword of Conan, although I haven't read the latest issue. I didn't, when I was getting this, I didn't think to look for the issue that I missed last Wednesday. It could still be on the stands, but I didn't think to look for it. I really do need to do that. So, on the one hand, I can't recommend this strongly enough, especially if you're a Conan fan. If you're a Conan fan and you're missing the Conan comic book, maybe you thought that the old Dark Horse run on Conan was a little bit dodgy. You'd have been wrong about that, because they were fantastic. Most of those issues were fantastic. Or maybe you're wondering, maybe you know about Comicsgate, and you're wondering, well, you know, this will be an SJW Conan, which is the ultimate travesty. I won't do it. I won't be part of it. If you're worried about that, you have legitimate reason to be, but you are wrong. These are Conan issues for the ages. 4 of them, anyway. Who knows what the future will bring, but if you're a Conan fan and a Conan comic book fan and you haven't been buying these issues, you absolutely have to. Don't wait for the trade paperback. Just buy the issues. They're amazing. So that is Comic Book Thursday for now. It's a rave, but also a mystery. I don't understand how the cadre of YA SJW writers, editors, and artists at Marvel could allow this to happen. These people picket and unperson and mob on social media at the drop of a hat. Why haven't they done it with this? Why is this allowed? The more I think about it, the more I think there has to be a top-down directive. You will not mob this book. You will not object to it. We want this franchise, and we're going to have it. The more I think about it, the more I hope that something like that is true. The next time that I Skype with my friend in Hollywood, I will ask her if she can dig around and maybe get some information on that. That would be great if I could learn the truth about that one way or another. But as long as the comics are great, I don't really care. So that's going to be Comics Thursday. For now, I will try to be more punctual on Comics Wednesday next week, when maybe it won't be 7 degrees Fahrenheit. That would be great. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.